Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast, Arise and Shine. Today, we'll be tackling the topic on mental health. And among our youth, especially our young Christians, there is this stigma about mental health, whether or not a Christian should be struggling with mental health, and what to do when you are found in that situation. And today we have with us Pastor Daniel from Mi.E.M.M Church Canada with us to answer our questions on that topic. Hello, Pastor Daniel.
Hello.
And thank you for joining us again today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So today we're going to be talking about mental health.
Sure.
And just to get started, if you can define mental health in your point of view.
Mental health is the ensemble of different type of health, if I can put it that way. Mental health first involves the emotional health of the person, the social well-being of the person, and the psychological well-being of the person. And it affects many things. It affects how a person interacts with others. It affects how a person thinks, and how a person speaks, or even their actions in general. Yeah.
And one of the popular questions, especially from the young Christian community, it's knowing, can a Christian suffer from mental illness?
Absolutely.
Can you briefly go further into that? Because sometimes there's that stigma that if maybe a Christian does have mental illness, is it because of their wrongdoing? Is it rebellion? Is it possession by a demon? Like all these different reasons as to why they may be mentally ill. But if yes, they can be mentally ill, then can you just dive deeper into that?
Mental health is like any other sickness. Now, like any other sickness as well, it can be affected by demons or evil spirits, or it can also be affected by different things that have nothing to do with the spiritual per se. The problem with mental health compared to physical health is that physical health is a lot easier to pinpoint and discover, because a person, when their body is hurting or once you can find it. But mental health, because you cannot actually physically see it with your own eyes, it's something that's not physical per se. That's why it's sometimes very difficult to detect. One example that comes, I know how you said a lot of people say that Christians may not have mental health. An example that always makes me laugh is the example of Elijah. When you take a look at Elijah in the Bible tells us that after he basically went back to back with the 400 prophets of Baal and the 450 of Astarte, and he was able to win, and fire came down from heaven and was able to consume the sacrifice, and he was able to bring down rain after he stopped rain for almost 3 years, or for 3.5 years. You would think that in front of all the people of Israel, in front of the king, in front of everybody, you could tell that this man was in the pinnacle of his career as a prophet. He proved that he was a prophet of God. He proved that God was with him. When he prayed, things moved, earth shook. He did all of that stuff. And then you hear that there's a woman named Jezebel who says, if tomorrow by this time I don't do the same thing to Elijah that he did to my prophet, or kill him, then let my gods punish me with as harsh of a punishment as they can. The Bible tells us that Elijah hears this. You would think that a man who knew that God was with him, God answered all his prayer. You would think that a man who was strong like that spiritually, who had that much power with the country and everything and popularity, that he would be like, no, she's not gonna do anything to me. But the Bible tells us that Elijah ran. And when he ran, his prayer was, Lord, I'm by myself now. I don't have anybody with me, and I'm no better than my father. Please let me die. And the interesting thing is how God responds to it. God doesn't even give him strength, or God doesn't even tell him be strong. God says, eat. He eats, he drinks, and then he goes to sleep. God wakes him up again and tells him, eat. As in to say, this was a very traumatic experience. I understand. Just eat. So That's just to point out that even people that were going through a different thing where it affected their mental state. In the Bible, there are examples like that. It's not something that has to do with just today's time. It's just that in today's time, it's more, we've given a name to it. We've given a name to it, and people are more conscious of it. But it's always been there since the beginning of time.
And as a Christian, should we be concerned about our mental health? Like, as Christians, we may be concerned about our spiritual health. Do I read my Bible? Do I pray? Or our physical health? Am I eating right? Am I exercising? So as a Christian, should there be an emphasis on our mental health and making sure that we are doing right mentally?
Yes, because mental health the mental health of a person has a direct impact with the way they deal with society or the external world as a whole. So when the mental health of a person is not in a good state, the way they deal with other people is also a little bit distorted. There's a saying that's very interesting, and there's some truth to it. The saying of hurt people hurt people. When a person's been hurt before, or they've been hurt, what they have the tendency of doing is wherever they go, they tend to hurt other people. They may do it consciously, they may do it subconsciously, and yet the result is still the same. So mental health is very important because it affects the well-being of a person.
But then it's a question of knowing, or since you said that mental health, it is important for us to take care of ourselves mentally, but oftentimes we may see that we don't have the adequate resources to assist us in maybe having like a measure or knowing a way of checking if we're doing right mentally. How can a Christian navigate that, knowing that, yeah, I should be concerned about my mental health, but what is the metric, or what route should I take to see if I'm doing well mentally, or if I need assistance mentally? Like, how can we go about that?
One of the way before you can try to resolve the symptom, you have to go to the root cause. What is causing the mental health issue? And there's a gentleman by the name of Maslow. He wrote this pyramid that's called the Maslow's pyramid of needs, and at the base of it is the psychological need of a person. Food to eat, a shelter, those basic physical things. But once you leave that physiological needs, everything else, it's basically mental. First, it's safety and security. Security is a very subjective thing, because for someone can leave their house and not lock the door of their front door, go on about their business and come back at night and feel secure that nothing is going to happen to them. And then there are other people where they leave their house, not only do they lock the door, but they will put a camera. And not only would they put a camera, but every hour or so they'll keep checking on their camera to make sure that even when there's a bird flying by, to make sure that nobody's coming into their house. So even the word security is very subjective from one person to the next. The second thing, for example, financial security. Financial security, how much money is enough for one person is different from the next person. To some people, as long as their bills are paid, they're fine. And other people, it doesn't matter how much money you give them, they will never feel secure. I'll still remember a very saddening story that I've heard of this young man who he needed money. So I'm just gonna give a number out there. He needed about $100. It's just a random number. He needed about $100, and he called all the different members of his family. Hey, can you give me $100? Can you spot me $100? And they kept telling him that, I'm really sorry, but at this time we don't have $100. And when he couldn't find $100 from the different people that he asked, he thought that for him it was the end, and he went and killed himself. Now, you and I both know that $100 would not be the reason for someone to put an end to their life. So then you realize that what made him go to that extreme is not necessarily the $100, but it's the fact that financially he did not feel secure, and that made him feel like he was at the end, and that was the only solution he had at his hand. Sometimes it's also self-actualization. Some people, they've had a dream, for example, that in my life I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to reach this level in my life, And because they don't reach that stage of their life, they feel like they're failures. Even though failure has nothing to do with what you do. But because they did not reach whatever goal, whatever dream that they set in their mind, then they feel like they're failures. So there's different, and I encourage people to take a look at that Maslow hierarchy, pyramid of hierarchies, because you will see that a lot of those things, they're not necessarily physical, but they're all mental, they're all in our mind, and they affect us very heavily. Now, from those different types of needs that are mainly mental, then you can pinpoint, okay, it's from, for example, if it's a need of a social need, the need to bond with people, have a family, the need to have friends, the need to have all these people, like people around you that you care about or that care about you. Now, sometimes there's people who they want that and they feel like they don't have it, or they don't have enough of it, or they feel like what they had wasn't what they were asking for, and it affects their mind, it affects their mental. The best thing that I can advise is first pinpoint from which area is that need coming from, or that you look at the different needs in that hierarchy and figure out which one is causing you the most harm. And then from there, then you can start treating it. First, understand the source or the root cause. And then once you understand the root cause, then we can start talking about treating it.
And there's other mental illnesses, because you mentioned how we have to identify the need. How about mental illnesses like people that are bipolar or have schizophrenia, where it's kind of hard to identify the need? How can someone that suffers from that, how can they navigate finding the need that is there so that they can get the help required?
For most of those bipolar or schizophrenia, a lot of those type of mental health, it's rooted in the development of the child.
Okay.
It's not something that is reached at an age of adulthood or maturity, but it's during their development stage is where they started developing those tendencies. It's from a very, very young age where something went wrong, and from that point on, they start developing. I like a story of Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry is the guy who became the Tyler Perry Studios and movie studios and all those different movies and so on. He talks about how when he was a kid, he used to see a lot of abuse. I think his father or his stepfather I believe his stepfather or his father used to beat his mother a lot. And so in order to escape that, he would go and hide under the house. And when he would hide under the house, he would close his eyes and try to close his ears as much as possible and try to imagine a play or a scenario where he was in a different scenario than what he was living currently. Now, that type of mentality where you close your eyes and you try to picture a different story is what helped him to become a movie producer and so on and so forth. Those are examples of people using their mind and it turned out good. But when it does not turn out well, when they use it and they take the dark path, that's when we start talking of things like bipolarism or schizophrenia, because it's basically when something traumatic happens, and as a result, your brain tries to find a way to cope psychologically, emotionally, or sociologically with that situation. And if you're not careful, it can lead you to a path where by the time they diagnose it as schizophrenia or bipolarism, it's already too late. So the roots, the best advice is go back to the roots as to when the person was young, in what environment they were in, and then from there you should be able to figure out what exactly started causing it. Of course, there's always the spiritual aspect of it, where it might be something spiritual where a person may need praying for, maybe needing deliverance. But aside from the praying for and the deliverance aspect of it, where the spiritual component is involved, there's also the mind component, the psychological and the emotional component that also has to be treated.
Okay, so for all mental illnesses, you would say that there is a cause to it, and just kind of backtracking and finding out what that cause is in order to find that healing, or just find the healing that is necessary so that you don't have to battle with the mental illness anymore.
You see, even spirits, when I was talking about spirits, evil spirits, and so on and so forth. Spirits, in order for them to come into a person and affect a person, they have to find a house. They have to find a fortress. And the fortress is usually a thought or a frame of mind or a mindset. It's based on the mindset or the frame of mind or the environment in their mental that the person is. It can be a place that is an environment that is welcoming of evil spirit to come and oppress them. Same thing with the Holy Spirit. For the Holy Spirit to come and reside in you, He come and reside in you, but there needs to be an environment of worship, an environment of communion with God, an environment where you're not all in a life of sin. That type of environment where there's holiness, there's obedience, there's connection with God, is that environment that makes it a perfect environment for the Holy Spirit to come and reside and express Himself. Well, the same thing with even evil spirits. But for them to come, there needs to be an environment, a mindset, a frame of mind, or a thought that has become a fortress that was developed first. There's a man who talks about when he was in the occult, and he explains how the way that whole thing started, he saw how his uncle was killed in front of him. And the way his uncle was brutally killed is what changed, basically ruptured his emotion. He became very desensitized when he saw people being hurt, because he's seen so many traumatic experiences that it actually affected the way he related to people in pain. But that was just his mind trying to cope with that traumatic experience that he went through at a very young age. So for most of those traumatic situations, you have to go back all the way to the root, and sometimes, or for the majority of a good portion of the time, it's a traumatic experience that happened, or a traumatic experience that happened in their youth.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to come back to, we talked about it earlier, like resources.
Right.
We see a lot in our society, how mental health is advocated for, how there's groups for mental health, how even in workplaces they take days to discuss mental health training, all these resources that the world offers in terms of getting the help you need, identifying it, taking time for yourself, like really treating mental health on a global scale and really taking the time to identifying the issues. But now it's a matter of knowing, as Christians, we don't just want to go into the resources that the world offers us, but we want to use resources that are based, spiritually based on faith principles. So what are the resources that we should be using to help us when we are struggling with our mental health?
The primary resource that we can use as children of God is the first one being prayer, because sometimes it's something that has to do with spirits. So you need prayer, and sometimes you need that relationship with God to help heal the broken heart. So prayer will be the first step. But I would also encourage people, the same way that if a person is sick, there's different treatments that a person may go through. One of the suggestions that I would advise is to watch their diet. And by diet, I mean watch what they see and watch what they hear. You don't have to know everything. There's this issue that goes in today's generation where everybody talks about FOMO, the fear of missing out. You don't have to be on top of everything that's going on. You don't have to see everything going on. You don't have to hear everything that's happening. So watch what you hear, watch what you see. And this third thing, if I can say, is be very mindful of your environment. Because certain environments, if you're not careful, those environments actually affect your mental health. If you see that at all time you keep having panic attacks when you're in a certain environment with a certain group of people doing a certain type of things, maybe if you removed yourself from that environment, that would drastically impact your mental health. So sometimes it's not just what you see, it's not just what you hear, but also the environment that you're in. Maybe if you changed environment, it would change even the state of your mental well-being.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because I've heard a lot of people say that based on their feed on social media, the things that they are seeing, it does affect their mood. When they see all of the things that are happening around the world, it may bring them to become anxious, even depressed. So what you're saying is really important, to really make sure that we're looking at our diet.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Pastor Daniel, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Arise and Shine podcast. We were able to talk about the topic of mental health and how Christians can also suffer from mental health and the struggles of mental health, and how we're able to cope and heal from mental health, the resources that are available, not just prayer, but also being able to see and observe our diet. What is it that we're seeing? What is it that we're looking at? And knowing that with all of those resources and with God especially on our side, that we're able to overcome anything. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.